What's your take on single driver speakers? Jason in Hong Kong writes to me, and he says, do you mind sharing your experience or opinion regarding single driver speakers? Me? I'll share my opinion on anything as long as someone's willing to listen. It seems that single driver speakers are very popular in the do-it-yourself community, and many people swear many people swear by its coherency and beautiful mid-range. If single driver speakers are really so good, why aren't they more popular? What are the actual audible weaknesses of single driver speakers? We can sort of sum that up pretty simply, but I want to start with the idea of a single driver speaker. So I'd like to give you a little bit of background. So years ago, everything was a single driver speaker. I mean, there were no such thing as separate tweeters and mid-ranges and all that. When we first started out, we had single drivers. Maybe they had what we call a whizzer cone, which is just a little cone, paper cone that's attached to the woofer. I remember my first stereo had a single driver, and it made the bass, and it made the mid-range, and it made the tweeter, and it had a whizzer cone. I wrote about it in my book, 99% True. And that's just the way everything was. Over time, the difficulties that I will talk about of single driver speakers became known, and people started developing drivers that were specific to specific frequencies. So we made tweeters that tweeted the little high frequencies and couldn't reproduce any bass, and we then took the duties of tweeting off of the woofer and we put it to the tweeter. Now we had a tweeter and a woofer, and later on someone said, well, I mean, there's still problems, because if I'm trying to make a driver do this much range, a very wide range, it can't do everything as well as something that has limited range, because something that has limited range, we can control the amount of weight and mass in the cone. We can do things to optimize a specific range, and the narrower that we make that range, the more specific we get, and the better we can achieve that range. When you try and have everything done, well, nothing gets done in spectacular fashion. So why do people like full range drivers? Well, one thing is, we talk about coherency. There is nothing more coherent from a ultimate of a point source, where everything is coming from one point source in terms of physical reproduction, than a single driver, which is one of the reasons why Chris Brunhaver, our new speaker guy, and Darren, Bob, and myself have all gotten so excited about our direction with our new speaker, the AN3, because it's going to have what's called a coaxial driver, which is a single point driver that has a tweeter right in the middle. And Kef does this a lot. Terry's LS50s have a coaxial driver. Now that's actually two drivers, but it looks like one. So you get the advantages of one driver, but you have then the advantages of two drivers from splitting up the frequencies. So that's one of the reasons people like single driver speakers. The other reason is that there's no crossover. One of the biggest problems in a multi-driver system is the crossover. In fact, it is the problem. Designing a crossover to take disparate drivers, divide up the frequencies, and do so in a completely seamless way is, I mean, you can't. You can do pretty well, and we're pretty doggone good at it. We can make it pretty seamless to where the advantages outweigh the disadvantages, but it isn't perfect, and so neither is a single driver speaker. One of the things that I like to point out to people is that engineering is always a series of compromises. There's no such thing as engineering the perfect solution. The perfect solution is the perfect compromise. That's just the nature of the beast. I don't care what you are engineering. Everything has a compromise. If it didn't, there wouldn't be backup systems. Anyway, we won't get into that. But that's what engineering is all about. So we like multi-driver systems because we feel confident enough that our crossover expertise, our ability to design specific drivers to do a specific task, all those advantages when put together in a synergistic system outweigh any of the benefits of a single driver setup, any that I've ever played with, okay? So that's your preamble. Briefly, what is wrong, and specific to Jason's question, what's wrong with it? Well, the first thing is, like this woofer, see how this moves up and down? Sorry, Ohm's Law listeners, I'm pushing up and down on a woofer. And a woofer, in order to produce decent bass, has to have a lot of surface area, and it probably better have enough mass to not flex and move around too much. So you got a heavy, stiff cone. Well, as I'm moving this up and down, making low frequencies, I'm also asking this same driver to make high frequencies. How does it do that? Well, as it moves slowly to make bass frequencies, at the same time, it's moving quickly, very fast, to make high frequencies. So you have this up, down, moving fast, but slow and slow and slow, and that makes Doppler distortion. It's pushing high frequencies forward, backwards, to the extent of the excursion of the driver. And that causes a kind of distortion that not everybody's totally sensitive to. But for those of us, like me, that is sensitive to that, I don't like the way it sounds. And there's so many things you have to do to make compromises to get that to where it works. I just am not happy with it, but that's the biggest problem with it. So just to summarize, the two big problems are no one driver can be great at everything, and two, whatever you wind up with, it has to reproduce highs and lows at the same time, and when you do that, you create Doppler distortion, which most of us are fairly sensitive to. Okay, great question, thank you. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye.